Boruto is going to give over his body to Momoshiki, or at least that's the cliffhanger that the ending of chapter 25 gives us in Two Blue Vortex. But why? Why would Boruto, who notoriously understands exactly how dangerous Momoshiki is, make a deal with Momoshiki, who's wrought destruction every time he's ever taken over Boruto's body, whether it was getting Boruto killed, stabbing out Sasuke's eye, or a myriad of other disasters that Momoshiki has imparted upon the loved ones of Boruto? Well, the answer seems to be Jura. See, apparently Boruto is much more backed into a corner than we originally anticipated. Even with the help of a Kawaki now lifted of his limiters, Boruto understands that the two of them apparently have no chance in combat against Jura, an eventuality that was kind of displayed in their most recent fight against him. As while Kawaki was seemingly able to impart a fair amount of damage to Jura's body, Jura didn't even seem remotely pressed. But is the separation in their power so incredibly drastic that Boruto needs to give over his body to Momoshiki to bridge the gap? I don't necessarily think so, especially when taking into consideration of help outside of Boruto and Kawaki in this final battle against Jura. Help from the likes of Team 10, Himawari, Moegi, Konohamaru, and so on and so forth. And thus, while I do believe that in a way Boruto is promising his body to Momoshiki, I don't believe that he is truly forking his body over permanently to Momoshiki. That is to say that I do genuinely believe that Boruto has a plan, and that plan does not include the destruction of the earth at the hands of Boroshiki. And as to what that plan is, well, I believe there's 4 options, and today we're going to be covering all 4 because today we're talking Boruto is tricking Momoshiki. But before we get to talking about anybody tricking anybody else, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're looking for an additional NC Hammer 23 video, you can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series using the 4th wall link in my description below. The Force of Death is done. We are on to the one-on-one battles. But before we get into all that, say we gotta talk about our favorite recurring sponsor to the page, Fume. Have you ever caught yourself reaching for a bad habit without even realizing you were doing it? Maybe it's because you were stressed or bored, or maybe because you wanted to fit in. Well, that's where Fume comes into play. See, Fume understands that it's not always about quitting, but sometimes about replacing. And that's where Fume comes into play, because Fume offers you a simple and enjoyable way to break away from bad habits, while still having something satisfying to reach for. See, Fume is an award-winning flavored air device that delivers great taste without any harmful chemicals. Instead of inhaling vapor, you simply inhale air, mixed with natural, non-toxic flavors that combine on the way in and satisfy that itch. And whether you're looking to keep your hands busy or your mouth busy, Fume's premium wood design, fixed with its fidget aspects, make it a fantastic fidget toy. This right here is my personal favorite. It feels premium in your hand. It's easy to take anywhere, and even easier to personalize. See, Fume offers a litany of different flavors, spearmint being my personal favorite. It's refreshing, it keeps me sharp, and I genuinely think it makes my breath smell better. But if you're not into minty flavors, there's literally an option for everyone. So what are you waiting for? Over 500,000 people have already chosen Fume in their journey to better choices. And if you're ready to try it, now is the time. For a limited time, if you order the Journey Pack using code NCHammer, you'll get a free Fume Topper, an awesome accessory to level up your Fume experience. So click the link in my description below, or go to tryfume.com/NCHammer, or scan the QR code on screen right now to get yours today. Now, if you're anything like me, the ending of chapter 25 came as a massive surprise to you, because for all intents and purposes, the last dozen or so chapters of Two Blue Vortex have very much painted the picture that Kashin, Koji, and Boruto, while not super confident in their current power level in a battle against Jura, had a roadmap on how to achieve a level of power that would allow them to defeat Jura. And I seriously doubt that any part of that roadmap ever including Momoshiki, who not only has a notorious track record of trying to destroy everything and everybody on Earth every time he gets a hold of Boruto's body, but also somebody who's incredibly invested into the idea of Jura not being defeated, on account of the fact that Jura is the Ten Tails. And therefore, in order for Momoshiki to move forward with his plans of consuming the world's chakra fruit, he needs the Ten Tails to consume Kawaki, and Jura is the only Ten Tails that he's got right now. Now, if you want to talk about the possibility of Himawari turning into a Ten Tails, that's an entirely separate conversational point. But basically, all the information that we've been given over the course of Two Blue Vortex is pointed at the idea that bringing Momoshiki into the fold would be an awful idea, and one that at least Kashin Koji had not planned for. And while obviously Kawaki's arrival in the battle against Jura, when Boruto used Flying Raijin to pop in to save Konohamaru from Matsuri, was a big surprise to Kashin Koji. I mean, we literally see him go like, and those events unfolding are so far out of his understanding that he literally gets a new download from the 10 paths that show him a new series of infinite futures now that all of those futures have been changed by Kawaki showing up. However, I can almost guarantee you, because I can't actually guarantee you, there's been no evidence to substantiate this point, that the only reason that Boruto knew that Kawaki had limiters placed on him by Amado was Kashin Koji, and therefore the idea of Boruto and Kawaki working together to battle against Juro was almost undoubtedly concocted by Kashin Koji. See, if Kashin Koji fully understands that Boruto stands no chance in a battle one-on-one against Juro, then yeah, the logical next step would be recruiting the only other person equally as strong as Boruto in the entire universe currently, Kawaki, who Boruto can curry the favor of by telling them about the limiters placed on them by their pseudo-creator. Otherwise, there's really no rational way to explain how Boruto knew that Kawaki had limiters placed on him by Amado. While yes, maybe he could have put two and two together that Amado put limiters on Code, and therefore Amado was most likely going to put limiters on Kawaki, Boruto knew the exact kind of limiters that Amado put on Kawaki. Information that only Kashin Koji would have been privy to either through the 10 paths or through the fact that he was incredibly close to Amado before Amado believed he died. Therefore, it appears as though that Boruto and Kashin Koji had been planning on the idea of Kawaki and Boruto defeating Juro with their combined power from the jump, and therefore the idea of including Momoshiki was not an idea from Kashin Koji, but instead Boruto. But Boruto has shown a lot of proclivity recently for moving on his own. Tie all this into Himawari's emergence as a legitimate threat to Juro, that is if she's able to harness her tailed beast power by training with Kurama, and with her added into the mix, making the Uzumaki family trio of Himawari, Kawaki, and Boruto all fighting against Juro simultaneously, it seemed as though Team Uzumaki and Team Konoha had enough power to get over the Juro-sized hurdle. Once again, assuming that Himawari is able to achieve the level of power that we all believe she's going to be able to achieve one day. And for a while, we speculated that the situation for Team Konoha would be even better than just sending out a full-powered Himawari, Kawaki, and Boruto in the battle against Juro. Because if we're being entirely honest, Moegi should have come back with some kind of power-up. Whether that be a Rinnegan, which I know is ridiculous, or a boost to her wood release, which is substantially less ridiculous. If she had seen a boost to her wood release, she could have used her wood release to clash against Juro, creating key openings for Himawari, Boruto, and Kawaki in this incredibly important battle. And in fact, if multiple people were going to be involved in this final battle against Juro, it would have drawn direct parallels back to the Kage, Sasuke, and Boruto's fight against Momoshiki and Kinshiki, where the strongest forces in the ninja world all came together to battle against an outside alien threat. However, it's appearing as though, kind of like the Kage versus Kin and Momoshiki, that the idea of this final battle against Juro is devolving much in the same way as that battle devolved. See, because while at the beginning of that fight, characters like Gaara, Darui, Chodoro, and Korotsuchi were all heavily involved in the combat against Momo and Kinshiki, as the fight began to get more and more serious, eventually only two people could compete, and those two people were Naruto and Sasuke, and by some extension, Boruto. And thus it appears as though that this battle against Juro is following a very similar path, where as Juro gets more and more serious, the responsibility for taking Juro out falls more and more squarely on the shoulders of the two strongest people on Earth right now, those being Boruto and Kawaki, who are essentially the new gen Naruto and Sasuke. Which then begs the question of why are we leveling up Himawari at all? See, I know what some of you are saying. Well, Nick, even when the Momoshiki fight got as heated as it ever was, well, Naruto and Sasuke were doing the majority of the heavy lifting, Boruto was still there, throwing invisible Rasengan. So maybe that's the role that Himawari is gonna fill. While Boruto and Kawaki do the majority of the heavy lifting, Himawari will be in the shadows, waiting to pounce. And, yeah. Maybe. But I don't want Himawari in the shadows. I want Himawari on the front lines, battling it out with equal powers of Boruto, Kawaki, and Juro. But whatever, that's just my biases. I like Himawari as a character, I want more of her. But let me get back on track. Even with this inevitability that Boruto and Kawaki are gonna do all of the heavy lifting in the battle against Juro, I don't see a scenario in which Boruto willingly hands over his body to Momoshiki. No, in actuality, I see one of four possibilities coming to pass. And some of these possibilities make a lot of sense, and others are kind of stretches and or lame. But unfortunately, at least for the lame scenarios, all four of these possibilities are pretty likely. Now, these four possibilities are A, Boruto is lying. B, he believes that his friends will be able to kill him when Momoshiki takes over his body and brings out Borushiki to play. C, that he's going to place a comma marking on a clone and use that clone to battle against Borushiki, taking him out once and for all. Or D, talk no jutsu. Now, if you know Boruto as a story and or Naruto as a story, you'll understand that all four of these possibilities are likely. Maybe not equally likely, but they're definitely all likely. Mostly dependent on just how spicy and or Kishimoto-like Ikimoto is feeling. So let's go through these possibilities one at a time and identify not only the details of them, but how likely they are, with obviously our first possibility, that Boruto is lying. Now, this is the possibility that, to me, feels the most rational, and therefore the least likely. Like, of course, Boruto could promise his body to Momoshiki, and then after defeating Jura, go, psych. And there really be nothing that Momoshiki could do. It's been shown time and time again that Boruto has the mental fortitude to be able to wrestle Momoshiki back into some corner of his subconscious. So even if Borushiki does come out to play in the final battle against Jura, there's a fair to decent chance that after Jura is defeated, Boruto once again begins to claw back at Momoshiki, slowly but surely suppressing him inside of himself, essentially locking Momoshiki back in his bedroom and telling him to wait until he's needed again. And considering the fact that Shikamaru's plan for defeating Matsuri was to leverage her feelings for Konohamaru, when the Shinju, especially Ryu and Matsuri at that moment in time, were morally ambiguous, childlike creatures, the precedent for using underhanded, sketchy, ninja-like tactics to lower the defenses of more powerful enemies just to stab them in the back when they turn around has been set. And these kind of underhanded tactics very much fit the current theme of Boruto, which is desperate times, desperate measures. And maybe it doesn't even start as a trick. Maybe Boruto does legitimately give his body over to Momoshiki. When him and Kawaki are walking up to battle against Jura, he just throws the baton to Momoshiki and says, kill the guy. And technically, this would be fulfilling what Boruto said he was gonna do with Momoshiki. Boruto said that if you kill Jura, I will give over my body to you. However, he didn't say I will give over my body to you forever. So either immediately after Jura is dispensed of, or when Momoshiki tries to do something that Boruto does not approve of, Boruto launches a mental counterattack, kind of like Itachi did on Orochimaru, clawing away at Momoshiki's psyche until eventually, like I said earlier, he's able to lock him away once again. Now, like I said, this does feel unlikely. The idea of Boruto just saying psych and tricking Momoshiki feels like hollow writing at best, which is why I believe the second possibility is actually more likely, even though it is substantially more grim. See, Boruto understands that he has a myriad of very powerful friends, like Kawaki, Sarada, Mitsuki, and maybe even Himawari. And if Jura is dead and gone, then you can absolutely bet your bottom dollar that Hidari is also gone. And therefore, Sasuke is free. And with all of those people accounted for, the fighting forces of Konoha are in pretty good hands. And therefore, Boruto probably understands that if all those people fight alongside each other, they stand a fair to good chance at killing Borushiki. And while that would kill Boruto, it would also kill Momoshiki. See, we have no real confirmation of how far the new Borushiki will scale. Will this new iteration of Borushiki be stronger than the original fused Momoshiki? We can't say, but we do know that a barely awakened Kamamarking Kawaki was able to flatline Borushiki in part 1. And while that was all happening while Boruto was fighting back against Momoshiki, and thus Boruto gave Kawaki a moment to stab him through the heart, are we assuming that this second battle against Borushiki would go any differently? If Boruto, regardless of the fact that Momoshiki was in charge, saw that Borushiki was trying to kill all of his closest loved ones, he'd probably be doing everything that he could from inside of Borushiki to slow down Borushiki. And while Boruto is much stronger than he was in part 1, and therefore Borushiki should logically be much stronger than he was in part 1, everyone is much stronger than they were in part 1. Sarada 1v1 to Shinju. The newly awakened, non-limited Kawaki was able to battle against Jura on somewhat equal terms. And if Sasuke gets released from his tree prison with a new Rinnegan and a new arm, well, yeah, he's gonna be stronger than we've ever seen him as an adult. Though that possibility is seeming increasingly unlikely, on account of the fact that both Moegi and Shinki got released from their tree prisons with no special upgrades, but also the two of them didn't have any pre-existing injuries before going into the tree prison. So, I don't know, let me hope. Anyways, all this is to say that while Boruto has gotten ridiculously strong over the course of the time skip, a lot of people have gotten ridiculously strong over the course of the time skip, and therefore we might see after the Shinju are dead and gone, and everybody versus Borushiki arc very similar to how Boruto began, which was everybody versus Momoshiki arc. And therefore Boruto's faith in all of his friends to kill him wouldn't necessarily be unfounded. They probably could kill Borushiki if they worked together, and that would be a really cool ending to Boruto. I mean, Boruto probably wouldn't die. There'd be some ninja bullshit. But still, it's also important to note that Boruto hasn't tried at all to reverse the effects of omnipotence. He hasn't tried to rectify his name with any of his friends. He hasn't gone to Ada and begged her to help him. And all of this might be evidence of the fact that Boruto has always planned to die. One, because he understands the threat that he as an Otsutsuki presents to the world. And two, because his only mission in life is to keep Konoha and his loved ones safe, even if that costs his life. On top of this, the sickest byfactor out of all of this is that it shifts our perspective on how we view chapter or episode 1 of Boruto. See, because as Kawaki and Boruto stand over a decimated Konoha, we believe that Kawaki is the bad guy in that equation. And we've been trying to figure out for months, if not years now, how exactly that iteration of Boruto is able to use his karma marking, as Boruto, as we currently understand, cannot use his karma marking. However, if that's Borushiki and not Boruto, that means that in that moment, Kawaki is actually the good guy defending Konoha against Boruto, and that would be awesome. And if you like the idea of Kawaki being the final defender against Borushiki over a destroyed Konoha, well, don't worry, we're doing an entire video on that, so, you know, bell. But enough about the possibility of Boruto literally dying, let's talk about the third possibility, which is a karma marking. See, one of the original ways that Amado and the higher-ups in Konoha planned to rid Boruto of Momoshiki was for Boruto to place his own karma marking on somebody else. Now, that somebody else was identified to be Code, as A, Code was a nuisance to Konoha, and B, he had already shown some proclivity with the karma marking, being a white karma marking owner. However, it doesn't necessarily have to be Code. In fact, Code's probably the worst out of two options. Rather, if Boruto was to place a karma marking on a clone of himself, not only would that be a substantially less dangerous option for Konoha, it would also have a substantially higher chance of being successful. See, Boruto is now 100% Otsutsuki. He got to 82% of his download, Kawaki flatlined him, and Momoshiki used the last 18% of the download to save his life. Boruto's last name is now legally Otsutsuki. And now that Boruto is 100% Otsutsuki, he can place karma markings. And as Amado has established himself as the literal master of karma markings, being able to craft one from essentially thin air with Akebi, his daughter's DNA and chakra, and place it on Kawaki, not only separating Ishiki's soul from the karma marking, but also ensuring that Kawaki wouldn't lose any power. Konoha has an asset that would allow for Boruto, who doesn't necessarily understand how to place a karma marking with little to no threat of it actually misfiring or killing the host. Tie us into the fact that there are two separate people in Konoha who have perfected cloning, those being Amado, who has cloned his daughter Akebi multiple times to create the multiple deltas or create the Akebi clone that's currently waiting for Kawaki to place a karma marking on it. Cloning is something that Konoha's got down packed. And as Orochimaru is a morally ambiguous character at best, evil at worst, who's absolutely intelligent enough to break themselves out of omnipotence, and Amado already has broken himself out of omnipotence, either of them could be recruited rather easily to make a clone of Boruto that Boruto places a karma marking on. Amado guides Boruto through the process of placing a karma marking on a clone, in the same way that Amado wants Kawaki to place a karma marking on Akebi, so that Akebi can have her chakra and DNA downloaded into her body and awaken as she once was. And thus, in the hypothetical circumstance where Boruto, the original Boruto, is killed, Boruto would be able to reincarnate into his clone body, completely as he was before, but now devoid of Momoshiki. Remember, this was the original idea. Just because Momoshiki lives in Boruto's original body doesn't mean that if Boruto were to implant his karma on some other clone body, or possibly Code, that Momoshiki would come along for the trip. And therefore, Boruto could put himself into a very similar situation that he did in part 1 with Kawaki, where he allows himself to be run through like Rin, except now, instead of hoping that Momoshiki saves his life, he just uploads somewhere else. Because this is fundamentally how the karma marking works. Low-ranking Otsutsukis place karma markings on vessels that are compatible with them, and then when they're killed by being consumed by a Ten-Tails, they upload somewhere else. And while this line of logic can be applied to both a clone and Code, doing it with a clone is much less dangerous for a myriad of reasons. See, because while Code has shown some compatibility with the karma marking, his white karma marking, he's already a threat to Konoha. Maybe not to people like Kawaki, but absolutely to people like Sarada-level threats. Sarada, Mitsuki, and Himawari probably stand next to no chance in one-on-one combat against Code. And they definitely wouldn't stand a chance against Code if Code got the boost that a karma marking from Boruto would give Code. See, because while yes, a karma marking is essentially a guarantee that one day you will die, up until you die, you get access to a crazy amount of abilities. Basically, everything that Kawaki is able to currently do with his kit comes from his karma marking, because the karma marking operates as a download of all of the battle experience, chakra, and DNA of the person who put it on you. And thus, if Boruto were to put a black karma marking on Code, as that karma marking uploaded into Code, Code would get all of the battle experience and all of the jutsus of Boruto. All things he would be able to use with devastating effect up until that karma marking hit 100% download rate, and Boruto was able to take over his body. On top of that, he would now get things like jutsu absorption and Rasengan Uzahiko, making him a legitimate world-ender threat. And in this world, where Konoha already has to worry about Boruto-Momoshiki running around, amping code is not a good idea. And while this new amped code could maybe be recruited into the anti-Shinju fighting force, because even though he did create him, the Shinju hate him and tore off one of his arms, now forcing Code into essentially a life of servitude to Jura, Code is still 100% an Otsutsuki fanatic. And as the Shinju are kind of an extension of the will of the Otsutsuki, being able to actively recruit Code in a battle against the Shinju feels unlikely. So if we're putting a comma marking on anything, we should put that comma marking on a clone. A clone sitting in some vat of liquid somewhere that's not gonna hurt anybody until that upload is complete. Now, with all that said, there is technically a fourth possibility. Though I'd be lying to you if I said that this fourth possibility wasn't my least favorite idea. See, because this fourth possibility hinges on the idea that somehow, someway, Boruto and Momoshiki will find a way to work together. Maybe Boruto will tell Momoshiki about how it's wrong to consume entire planets' life forces, and Momoshiki will tell Boruto about how he's just trying to live the life that his parents told him he should, or something like that. Which would draw obvious parallels to the fact that Naruto believed that Kurama was an entity of pure evil in the beginning of his story, but eventually befriended him, and thus if Boruto would be able to befriend Momoshiki and use his power for the forces of good, that would be a very similar journey to Naruto's journey with Kurama. However, there's one pretty big difference between Kurama and Momoshiki, and that's the fact that Kurama was not a genocidal, planet-eating monster. Yeah, did Kurama kill? Like, a lot of people. 100%. But Kurama didn't want to kill a lot of people because Kurama wanted to kill a lot of people and consume their life force. Kurama killed a lot of people because nobody would leave him alone. Kurama, like all of the tailed beasts, was an entity of pure power that was abused by people, and therefore Kurama learned to hate people. Momoshiki is not in the same camp. Momoshiki is a narcissistic sociopath who consumes entire planets whole. There is no talk, no jutsuing Momoshiki, and if there is, well, I'm not interested in it. I don't want to see a redemption arc for Momoshiki. Momoshiki is and always will be evil. But then again, maybe around this point at Naruto, I believe that same thing about Kurama. Who's to say? But I'm curious to hear from you guys. What do you believe is going to happen between Boruto and Momoshiki? Do you believe Boruto's actually going to give over his body, or is there some trick afoot? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, tomorrow's my birthday, and I'm gonna go celebrate.